Hey, welcome back to part 2 as we get down and dirty with Dr. Greg Whiteley. If you haven't done so, head back and catch the first half where Greg starts to take us through the science and the facts around hand hygiene. And now our story continues in the supergerm breeding grounds of our hospitals.
We published another great paper called Finding the Bad Bugs in a Busy ICU. And we did it in Western Sydney. A colleague of mine, Dr. Jessica Farrell, and I went in there with another colleague, Professor Ian Gosbell, who was the infectious disease physician. And we were in this particular intensive care, which is huge. I mean, one of the biggest in Australia. And we were looking for bugs. We weren't looking for the transmissions. We were just looking for doing bits and pieces of locations. You won't be surprised. They're where people touch commonly. The computer mouse. Certain keys on the keyboard of the computer that everyone used at the healthcare work. They used to call it a nurse working station, but it's really, healthcare
So you're
workers.
saying that the delete key is just saturated with E. coli.
Delete, enter, spacebar, E, R, and S.
Yep.
And
okay.
But then my favourite was the chair that everyone sat at that location.
Yes.
The highest amount of these bugs was when you pull the chair back. What do? You grab the top of the chair and pull it out so you can sit on it. And then what's the next thing you do? You sit and think, who's been sitting in this chair last? So what's the first thing you do? You reach under and adjust the height of the chair.
Yes.
Jessica found the bugs there. It was fantastic. We had another...
and what would be funny about that is it's underneath. So if you look down, you see a clean lift handle, but if you look under it, that's where it'll be.
Well, no, it was both sides. It's where you're touching, your hands and fingers, And another friend of ours, Associate Professor Karen Vickery, Emeritus Professor Vickery, she showed her favourite one was she went to a different ICU. It was being decommissioned. They double chlorinated this to kill all the bugs before she was allowed in, which was even doubly funny. So they double disinfected it. Okay. She went in. My favourite thing was as you went through the flexible glass plastic entry doors, it was where all the liquids were. Just alive with biofilm and bugs. Her favourite was they had a specific bucket with a lid where they put all the sterile medicines because they had to take them out sealed. So take the medicine, off, get the one you want, put the lid back on so no one would steal from them, They were in the sterile medicine bucket, Oh, look, would you like your injection with some VRE? It comes at no extra cost, How about some Staph aureus? We've got plenty of that going around. These bugs do what they do evolutionarily. They're evolutionary primed to move about with people. And, these bugs that can cause these diseases on a healthy person, they usually won't cause any illness. You can have them on your skin. You could have them in your, any of your body orifices. And generally, if you're not on antibiotics, your body, they'll die out within, weeks to months. You won't even be able to detect them. As I say, it's not something everyone needs to worry about, but in the context of certain contexts, food preparation, anywhere that's a food factory, pharmaceutical manufacturing, probably kindergartens, because, most children are vestibules of some sort of plague. That's just the nature of them. They're spreading germs everywhere and their immune systems are getting used to germs. But in that context, hand hygiene is important. Again, Mary Lou McClaw's published work that showed that most people learn about hand hygiene when they're toilet trained. And in most cases, it's their mother that trains them. So it's another Freudian excuse to blame your mother for something. But really, it just shows the absence of fathers, if that's the case, training their children to wash their hands properly. Yeah, there you go.
I was going to say, though, if it was the guys doing the training, then it would be a rapid downhill spiral for all mankind and would be disappearing in 3 generations.
Dead.
Yeah.
Again, the number of people you see, this is for the ladies because you don't get to enjoy the benefits of going to a male public bathroom, but the number of men that either don't wash their hands or run them under running water as though it's some sort of magical solution. Is it hyperchlorinated water or something? No. And they think that that somehow sanitised their hands. Well, no, it hasn't. All they've done is give them the bugs a drink.
You go into a bathroom and someone's been there with explosive diarrhea beforehand. Sure. What's the increase in risk?
How soon afterwards?
Yep.
So,
Okay.
look, there are two risks. One thing we know from other work that's been done, again, published internationally, is you should always flush with the lid down.
Okay.
That is the nature of things, because even with these modern low aerosolized toilets, you get an amount of aerosol created. And in that aerosol, you will have fecal or germs. Someone that's got a gastrointestinal infection in particular, or a bowel issue of some sort where they've got a lot of gas coming out with their fecal material, yeah, look, you're going to have bugs suspended in the air. Now, if that's been a viral infection, that's particularly risky. But even if it's something like a salmonella, it's risky. A little bit depends on the bug, because some bugs, to get an infection, you need a fairly high initial dose. For some other bugs, the dose is incredibly low. And it depends on the bug, and we don't have time to go through all of it. So flush with the lid down. If you can smell foul odours, the toilet's unclean, generally. There's insufficient air changes. There may be insufficient cleaning. Funnily enough, it's one of still the most common reasons why people change their contract cleaner is smelly toilets. And often that's because the people doing the cleaning don't realise you can't just stand back with a big broom and clean it. You have to get in and make sure you've cleaned all of the spaces around. It's another advantage of the modern toilets, where they've got a lot of the material hidden and it's got easier cleaning surfaces. That's an issue, cleaning.
So a tip for EHO, if you can smell it, chances are there's a problem and you need to dig deeper. I'm not sure if you want to dig. But if you're a general public person and you're walking into a toilet and you can smell it, the best thing you can do is walk back out again.
Yeah. Find a mask in your pocket and put the mask on. You know, if you have to go, you have to go. But certainly wash your hands. Remembering that fecal oral germs largely are spread by touch, not by aerosolized means.
Okay, so even if you saw a feral toilet and you had to use it, the best thing you can do is protect yourself by washing your hands.
Absolutely. And, you know, getting out of the toilet where you're going to grab hold of the handle might be a different issue. And if it's got paper toweling, try and find a way of using the paper toweling to get the hell out of there. And look, EHOs, we have to do a huge array of inspections. I mean, again, when I first started work, I started work in Wollongong. Hello to my friends in Wollongong and down the south coast. And we used to have to do inspections of houses where there was hepatitis B reported, because it was a reported infectious disease. And we knew it was fecal oral. So again, back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there were still night cart services. You know, the sewer wasn't connected across all parts of Wollongong. And so outbreaks of hepatitis A were not uncommon. It's a classic fecal oral bug. One of a good mate who I won't name got it in Southeast Asia at one stage. I've got a photo of him. He's as yellow as a Shell service station sign. And in fact, when he went to the hospital, and doctors, it's so rare these days, had never seen it, thought that he had late stage liver disease, you know, probably a carcinoma, and thought he'd better call his priest and have the last rites administered. And when the ID physician finally gets in there, or the hepatologist gets in there and goes, he's got hepatitis A, what are you idiots doing? Send him home, he's dangerous. Yeah. So, you know, that was true story. I mean, we just don't see it these days. But the virus that we do see, of course, is norovirus, which is usually seasonal. One of the funny things about norovirus is it loves hanging around on stainless steel surfaces, like the toilet door. And I've got another colleague who did some work looking at it as an outbreak on, I think it was the Colorado River, and he was looking at houseboats that were rentable. And people would often get it on the houseboats. They couldn't find it in the water. They found it in the door of the fridges. Get it day one and get something out of the fridge, you've got norovirus. I'm eating, 2 days later, sick as a dog. And fortunately...
And then you go into a commercial kitchen and you've got nothing but stainless steel.
Yep. Fortunately, they generally are so sick they don't stay at work. And, you know, noro is a pretty horrible thing for 24, 48 hours. And it's a self-limiting, you know, and usually non-fatal, horrible bug. But yeah, normally they won't be at work for very long. As opposed to, say, again, some of the other fecal oral bacteria where you can continue to shed it for quite a prolonged period of time.
How long?
Oh, it depends on the person, depends on the bugs. Typhoid Mary kept
Yep.
going most of her life. You know, she was never allowed to go back to the food industry.
Yes.
These days, our genetic testing is a little bit better, so we can usually make sure that you've cleared it from your body. And again, infectious diseases medicine is so much more advanced from when, you know, Typhoid Mary was roaming around. Or John Snow found the classic pump handle where they were pumping water out in London. And of course, the water was being contaminated by basically what were failing septic tanks, and everyone was getting sick. So,
Yeah. One of the things that it still happens now, and it just absolutely amazes me, but, you know, COVID started. And so straight away, people went, food safety is important. So we can't have people touching food. So you've got a tray of, even it got down to biscuits. So biscuits, cakes, sandwiches, or whatever. And so every single tray then had a set of tongs on the trays. And you're going, so previously people would walk up and touch their one sandwich and take it away, or potentially touch the one next to it. But now you've got tongs. Tongs, good or bad idea?
which end are you touching?
So you're only touching the tongs, and the tongs are touching the food.
You hope.
But the previous person's touching them. And so it just, that one struck me as odd, is that, yeah, we've now got a single point of contact that we're forcing everyone to touch in an effort to stop them from touching the sandwich next to the one that they're picking up.
Look,
So
I would say it's better than people's hands, because you don't know. So I pick up this one and I have that one. And you come along, there's only one sandwich left. Well, you've got my germs on your sandwich now.
okay, so you don't know who's handled it beforehand and not taken it.
As long as the tongs are subject to their own regular sanitising process, because if they're out for, a couple of hours, someone's going to drop them. Someone's going to touch the wrong end. Eventually, they themselves get contaminated. It's all about breaking the cycle of infection or breaking the cycle of disease transmission. And a physical barrier between a human and whatever it is number one.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to my real pet hate, gloves. Gloves in hospitality.
Oh, gloves.
What's the research on gloves and the spread of infection?
Funny you should ask. Another one of our peer-review international publications showed that gloves are as good for spreading the bugs as hands. They will stay on your gloved hands for, again, 19 touches. Where it gets interesting was we used 3 types. We used nitrile, was it Tyvek, but I think they were Tyvek gloves, and also rubber gloves. So we used the 3 types. And we found they're all the same. In fact, natural PVC were the best, because natural PVC being natural rubber, there's naturally antimicrobial materials in rubber. But of course, they're all designed as single use. But here's where it gets interesting with the rubber gloves. What we found with the rubber gloves, if you had dry rubber gloves, or dry gloves, let's not say rubber, dry gloves with a PVC or whatever they are, the 19 touch rule applies. But if you've been using them to do some cleaning with a neutral detergent at, say, 1 in 10 solution, so that's not overly dilute, but you've now got a wet solution, and then you touch the biofilm, those bugs, you pick up 10 times as many, but they don't stay on your hands for as long. So, what happens in healthcare, it's the same in food service. People put on the gloves as though it's protecting them. It's like, I've got gloves on. It's a force field. The rule of thumb, actually in medicine, is from the 5 moments of hand hygiene, is you should change or wash your gloves as often as you would wash your hands. And that's the rule. So if you were meant to wash your hands, then either change your gloves or wash the gloves. The same applies in food service. I mean, someone will wash their hands, put their gloves on, then they start working on the raw chicken, and then they go straight to the cooked chicken, put it in someone's sandwich. Well, someone's sandwich probably isn't at risk unless it sits around for 2 hours or 3 hours. But the chicken that's in that little non-cooled properly pot, because the real temperature is 16 degrees and not 4 degrees or 6 degrees, well, that's their, the bugs are growing, having a happy time. By the time they go into someone's sandwich, you've gone from 10 to the 2 bugs to 10 to the, 7 or 8 bugs per milligram. And you've gone from a marginally not very nice dose to clearly a food poisoning dose.
So the local cafe down here, I actually took my phone out and filmed the person making sandwiches, and she was touching the raw meat, or the ham and whatever. And then she was going out the back and getting stuff and touching bread and touching absolutely everything.
Yep.
And I filmed her for 5 minutes and didn't change her gloves once. And then I spoke to the owner and said, look, just watch what's going on here. And she just watched it. And I said, she hasn't changed her gloves once. She goes, yeah.
So what?
And so what? Like,
she should have done medicine, that woman. She should have clearly have done medicine. That's how a lot of them are as well.
So every time she handled the meat, she should have then, and went to handle something else, changed the glove. Like, change your gloves as often, you should wash your hands. She turned around and said, well, if we did that, we'd go through hundreds of gloves a day. I go,
wash your hands.
That's why they come in bulk packs.
Yeah, that's right. Build it into your cost. How about you wash your hands, you dirty sod? Look, part of the problem is people don't perceive the risk. So let's take it out of hand hygiene and put it into risk management. People do not perceive the risk. They don't see the link between what they're doing and the bugs getting onto the food and growing. And look, some of those concepts for someone that probably has not got a lot of scholastic capacity, being incredibly polite, some of those concepts are a little bit abstract. It's a little bit hard to perceive. And you'd love to think that education would help. And look, it will. But that's part of the role of the EHO is there are some people that are going to learn the easy way. There are some people that are going to learn a much harder way. And there are some people that are never going to learn whatever you do. And I have many friends, who are EHOs. One of them, I think, is now living in Tasmania. Mark, hello out there if you're watching. He and I did a paper on implement hygiene in food preparation areas using a method of assessment called ATP testing, and published the paper in the American Journal, actually, of Environmental Health. It was hilarious. People just couldn't perceive necessarily what we're doing. One of the great things about doing ATP testing, which is funny, I've got another colleague who's actually going to do this in EHO in Western Australia, actually. It's a great teaching tool because it quickly shows people, they don't understand that you're not really measuring the bugs. They just see a number. But if you've cleaned aseptically, and I could show people this when we did this work, you can get a reading of 0 or close to 0. Whereas when you found something dirty, and it wasn't even visibly dirty, you were reading in the hundreds or the thousands. The best thing we found, believe it or not, were a couple of cutting boards, plastic cutting boards in one of the bars, where with the unit we were doing, which would read down to a 0, we were getting readings above 2,000, what's called relative light units. And it's because all they were doing with these things were basically high pressure washing them. So they're never getting rid of the juices, and the bugs are just living there. The cells out of the limes and other things they were cutting up are also still there, but the bugs are there. Now, it's not really a direct measure of the bugs, but if you've got a food source there, then the bugs are going to get there and they're going to grow. And once they grow, they're going to spread. That's what happens. And one of the great things about ATP testing is it's instantaneous. You don't need to understand a lot of it, but it's instantaneous. There are some trips and traps, but it's instantaneous. It will tell people straight away. It's a shock to people when you actually can swab their hands. And swab their hands after they've been in the bathroom, swab their gloves. I mean, you've got someone who wants to swab their gloves, go, okay, now wash your hands, get them to wash the gloves, dry them, just use a piece of paper, clean paper towel to dry them, and swab it again. They'll be reading in the couple of hundreds, and now it'll be down to either less than 100 or something close to 0, just from washing.
So slight tangent, you're an EHO, you walk into a restaurant or cafe, they wear gloves. A blind man walks into a bar, leans over, whacks his dog and says, warn me next time.
Yeah.
If you were to reach into the bin and just grab the top glove off and just swab that, you'd suddenly get a true idea as to how long they kept their glove on and how contaminated it was.
Well, I'd rather I'd rather grab it before it went in the bin, because once it's in the bin, it's cross-contaminated with whatever else is in the bin. And, you know, in one sense, the data's no good. But, you know, as they're doing this and pulling it off, oh, yeah, baby, that's the time to grab them and swab them, because you will get a reading. I went to a colleague of mine's, a hospital colleague. I was showing him about ATP, and I swabbed his desk and got a reading of, 200 or 300. Wasn't bad, wasn't good. Might have been in the 300s. He said to the ID physician next to him, she was a nice young lady, he said, come on in, have a look at this. And he said, look at this, 300, And she said, oh, come and do mine. I'm not like him. I got a clean desk. I swabbed hers, it was 2,000. What are you doing at the desk? Oh, I just had lunch.
Yep.
So that is how microorganisms, you cannot see the soiling. You cannot see the risk. The risk is an imperceived risk. And it's one of the challenges for us as EHOs is to get across to people in a clear way and an easy to understand way, the risk that comes from these unseen bugs. And of course, look, in hospitals, there was a wonderful paper published some years ago asking the questions, are hospitals too clean to trigger hand hygiene behaviour? Because, most hospitals are pretty clean visually, not always, but visually. And, is that part of the problem? Because if your trigger for hand hygiene is how you were toilet trained, then if something smells bad, you'll probably wash your hands. If you've done certain biological things in the bathroom, you'll probably wash your hands, And depending on how well you've been trained by your parent, you may wash your hands thoroughly, or you may wash your hands in a very abbreviated and completely inefficacious way. That is, basically, it does nothing. Again, the risk perception to trigger hand hygiene is, oh, no, that's dirty. I say it in lectures, and you may have heard me say this, Shane, it's really interesting. When people first time smell a dead body, they know exactly what it is. If something's dead, you know exactly what it is. And it doesn't matter even that it's a dead animal. And EHOs have to do this work, not irregularly. There's something that is a genetic trigger in our nasal and olfactory senses that sends an alarm to the brain saying, this is death. Watch out. Be aware.
You get the gag reflex. You just want to...
There's a whole array of things. What are we reacting to? Well, part of it is, the smell is obviously molecules in the air that come from the decomposition. The decomposition is usually caused by bacteria feeding on the flesh and off-gassing, and they off-gas certain materials. But it's an interesting thing that in an evolutionary sense, we as humans have an automatic predisposition to avoiding it. Oh, get away, Or if someone finds someone who's deceased and they know I've got to find out what that is. That's really bad. And they'll stumble across a dead body, and it's a smell they'll never forget. But they knew what it was straight away, which is why they thought, what is that smell? Because there's an evolutionary trigger for us.
So part of the problem is, we smell a dead body and we know something's horribly wrong, but we see a clean surface and we assume everything's safe. And part of the challenge with hospitality is more often than not, if you go and touch something and you then touch a sandwich, you're only going to get one person sick. And so you're really not going to see the consequences necessarily. But every now and then you have a pandemic that is there to remind you that the small things are the things that then build up.
It's 2 or 3 people get sick, but if you go to a wedding and 25 out of 100 get sick, it goes off to the EHOs, and the EHOs get called in. And then they have to do the investigation. And there's a whole pile of what we call epidemiology, where we're looking at the nature of the illness and what bugs are likely to cause it and where are they likely to grow and what are likely to be the causes of contamination. And these days with modern genetics, that's actually quite a quick process. If you go back even 20 years, you used to have to find the bugs and grow them. And these days, some of the modern testing systems, you can find things out really very quickly and narrow it down very quickly as to what we're looking for.
So one of the themes that's running through the EHO Knows podcast is really that environmental health officers are behind the scenes, and when they do the job right, no one sees it. But what we've been talking about now is when people seem to be doing the right thing, they may not be doing the right thing. And so then you have to get them to change their behavior so that they still don't see what they're doing, but now they're doing it right. And so the irony is that it is, the hidden, but you're making the difference.
Absolutely right. And look, I'm a life fellow of Environmental Health Australia. I love the work that EHOs do. I'd love that more of them were willing to do postgraduate research with me. Anybody out there that wants to do some research, still let me know. I'm sure that Shane will be happy to share my email address. We love EHOs and what they do. They are frontline healthcare workers. They're also frontline environmental workers. I mean, and I know that we're on a food hygiene, but again, the biofilm stuff we're talking about, one of the problems with so much pollution, particularly water pollution, is the first thing that gets taken out is in fact the bacterial wet biofilms. And work done recently in the Blue Mountains National Park, where an old coal mine was leaking out all sorts of heavy metals. The creek looked sterile. There was no algae growing. It looked pristine. Because there was enough heavy metal in the water to kill a brown dog from 100 yards away. And I did, even when I was an undergraduate, we had to do a little trial mock EHO thing. And we went to a particular location in inner Western Sydney where the council had as a subsidiary unit a battery recycling facility, an old car battery recycling facility. Because old car batteries, right, they're filled with lead. Anyway, I heard about this. I'd done some reading about lead. It was really quite interested in toxicology. So I said, let's go and have a look. So the council guy took us and showed us this lead facility. Well, a couple of things stuck out immediately. First of all, there's broken car batteries everywhere with these knuckleheads breaking them open with a hammer and pulling the car battery lead out with their hands, with their bare hands. And so the ones they haven't opened are sitting here with the lids all taken off, and they're pouring the acid out on the ground. So there's acid leachate going everywhere. And the next guy come like, crack it with a hammer. But anyway, crack it with a hammer. There's lead everywhere. Put the cases over there. They go back in the landfill, get the lead. That goes in the bucket. And the little runoff along the side, the leachate, was basically running into like a clay-formed little side stream. And it was sterile. And I was like, oh, my God. Well, we sent a report in. We went through the council. They said, well, you guys got a problem with this. You've got to fix it up. And they did. Well, when they got the actual state people in, including the health and safety people, not only were the knuckleheads doing the battery opening underage, they had bilirubin levels of lead off the scale. I mean, you'd find more lead in a smelter than in their urine, but only just. And of course, there's lead pollution everywhere. So they then had to have the whole thing cleaned up and taken out to the chemical waste dump out in Castlereagh in those days. But the first thing to go in that context, now that little leachate went into, I think, Duck Creek in Western Sydney, which then flows into the Parramatta River. EHOs, in that regard, these biofilm issues in an environmental context, if you see a sterile water source, that looks pretty clean. You might need to ask why. It might be because it is sterile and it's clean, or it might be because someone upstream's doing something that you might want to have a look at, because you just don't know what turns up. And so this whole biofilm area is an exploding area of microbiology. And look, I know that at Hawkesbury, they're looking at the nature of biofilms in the context of climate change and all sorts of other, contexts and the types of soil systems, and also a wonderful area of microbiology to be in.
Yes. Now, I'm going to wrap up. It's probably better to wrap up on the future's looking positive, and there's lots of research happening. But yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing. We'll drop what is your email address?
Oh, look, the best one is greg.whiteley@whiteley.com.au. That's the easiest one.
If you ever get the chance to hear Greg at a conference, just take it. Doesn't matter what the topic is, it will be fascinating. It'll probably be a little bit horrific and well worth it. And so, thank you very much for your time today. Yeah, it's been great having you on EHO Knows.
Shane, thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for your recipients of the podcast listening or watching. I really appreciate it. Drop me a line anytime. I still chair one of the committees overseeing the Bachelor of Environmental Health at Hawkesbury or Western Sydney University, and so I'd be delighted to talk to any EHOs out in the field.
Thank you.